Hi, I'm Tara, and welcome to Lesbian Books. This week I'm excited because author A.L. Brooks is back. She is the author of 7 lesbian romances and one pretty damn great erotic book. The latest is a superhero romance called Never Too Late for Heroes. All of her books are everywhere from Ilva Publishing. Welcome, Angela.
Hello.
So, this podcast idea actually came from you. Do you want to lay out for listeners what we're going to be talking about today and where that idea came from?
Yes, I do. I'm very excited about this. So today we are talking about romance series in lesfic. It came about for 2 reasons. One, I was having a reread of a certain series that I'll be talking about shortly and was thinking, God, I love this series. And secondly, I was writing a romance myself that I realised, because it was based on, it's a secondary character from one of my previous novels, is now getting a book of her own. And I thought, oh, does that mean I'm writing a series? And I thought, I don't know that it is, because she's a secondary character from book 1, but she's now getting her own story and it's going in a whole different track from where the first book went. So does that still count as a series? Don't think it does, not sure. So then I started thinking about what actually makes a series. So I came from a mainstream background in books. My first job when I left school was working in a mainstream bookshop. And I knew then that there were series, but they always seemed to be crime or sci-fi fantasy series. I didn't know of any back then romance series in the mainstream. Probably there are some. I just never saw them on sale in our shop. And when I came to lesfic, I realised that it was the same thing. There was lots of crime series. You've got lots of detectives that have like 16 books in a series and lots of sci-fi fantasy series. But then discovering that there was almost also romance series was like, wow, this is cool. You can get a series of romance characters as well. Yeah, this is just like icing on the cake as far as I was concerned. So then, because I'm a little bit of a geek and I like classifying things and organising things, the more I thought about this podcast, the more I came up with a classification system for romance series. Someone might have already done this, and if they have, great. But this is what I've come up with. Are you ready for my grand system?
I am so ready. Lay it on me.
Okay. First up, you have a pure series. Okay, what I call a pure series. This is where it's the same 2 main characters in every book of the series. The whole series is just about them 2. Yeah?
Yep.
And I've got one of those to talk about shortly.
So do I.
Hey. Perfect. The second one is a shared universe. Okay, so this is where all the characters in the series know each other. But that's further split into a closely shared universe where it's the same set of characters in all the books. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be talking about one of those. Or what I call a loosely shared universe where each book features different main characters, but the main characters from the other books all make a brief appearance because they all inhabit the same world. And one of the best example I can think of that is Jay's Hollywood series.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So the main characters in book 1 pop up as minor characters in book 2 and again in book 3, but they all intermix, but only very, very slightly, just because they happen to share the same acting world.
Yeah.
Yeah? There's also a type of series, I think, that's called an evolving universe, where the universe stays static, but the characters that were in the first couple of books take a back seat as the series evolves, and more characters are added and they take over as the main characters. Best example I can think of here is French Kissing by Harper Bliss. So you end up by book 4 where your main characters are a whole new set of characters that weren't in book 1 at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And the main characters, book 1, have really faded into the background. They're still there, but they're not the focus of the story anymore.
Yeah, it's really only Dominique and Steph that are kind of the linchpin between the first set and the following set, which you kind of need because in the following set, it's the people working for Dominique.
Yeah.
Interesting. I like this classification system.
I had such fun thinking about it and I thought, oh my God, I'm such a geek. People are just going to be listening to this going, what is she on?
I don't know. They might get excited. Now they might want to go through all the series that they've read and try to figure out which is which because...
I think there's going to be a spreadsheet.
I think there might be some series that kind of cross over between them all though where...
Yep.
All right. So what is your first series?
Okay, so My first series is what I call a pure one, where it's the same characters all the way through the series. And it's the Shaken series by K.G. MacGregor, which I read earlier this year. And I absolutely loved it. There are 4 books in the series, which again is a little bit unusual because people often do a trilogy, 3 books, 3 and out. This one's got 4. They're all focused on Anna and Lily. And they meet in book 1, funnily enough, which is called Without Warning, when they get caught up together in an earthquake in LA. Being trapped and then rescued forms a bond between them that neither of them can quite define, which obviously it sounds perfectly plausible. They talk a lot as a way to quell their fears of never being found. Lily is openly gay, Anna is straight, but she's married to a guy who she knows isn't right for her. They get rescued. When they accidentally meet again months later, they go out for dinner to catch up, and soon a friendship forms that becomes so much more. ... What I absolutely loved about this series was how completely believable the development of their story was over the 4 books. Yeah. So book 1 could have just been a standalone. You could have left it at the end, job done, everybody's happy, lovely jubbly. Yeah. Mm. But I loved how MacGregor went, well, yeah, but what would happen next? Based on how they met and how their romance then developed in book 1, where would they go as a couple? And she then gave them some brilliant storylines in the following 3 books that were completely authentic and believable. At no point did I think, oh, yeah, she's just really stretching it out here. It's not at all. I mean, she covered some really hard subjects in book 3, I think it is. One of the characters has a mental illness that's not often discussed in public, never mind in lesfic. And I thought that was really brave to go down that route because it ended up as a much darker book to the others. And I thought that was brilliant, that she didn't shy away from that. And it's just, the final book just wraps it all up in a lovely way that just leaves you completely satisfied with the story that these 2, you feel like you've really lived with them through I think it must cover about maybe 10 years. I can't remember. I could have got that wrong. But you just really, you really feel like you've been on their journey. You get to the end and you just close that last page and you're like, oh, that was so good. I'm so happy. Yeah, it just really sucked me in. I mean, I read all 4 books in the space of about a week, I think, when I was on holiday, because it didn't occur to me to not read the next book as soon as I'd finished the previous one. It was like, no, I have to find out what happens next. What's going to happen? And that's quality writing, isn't it? When you get sucked in like that and you just want to keep reading. So
totally.
Highly recommend that one. Highly recommend it.
Okay, well, I haven't read it yet, and now you're making me want to.
Aha.
As if my list isn't long enough.
Aha, yeah, sorry about that. Sorry, not sorry.
Sorry, not sorry.
So what's your first pick of series?
So my first pick is the Honor series by Radcliffe. And when you ask people, what's your favorite Radcliffe series? That turns into an incredibly lively discussion. Because for some people, the Provincetown series is their ride or die. And it's excellent. Absolutely. I read the whole thing of that and I love that. I love her medical romances. I love her... What else was I going to say? Oh, and then I realized I ran out of series that I've read before. So I have not read her paranormal series.
Okay.
What are they, like werewolves or something? I don't know. I haven't read them. And I haven't read her Justice series because that sounds a little too like Law and Order SVU for me in some cases. But I read Above All Honor very early, which is the first book in the series. It was one of the first lesfic books I ever read. So I talked about this a lot of times. I found lesfic because of a Jezebel. They posted a list on Autostraddle that was like the 10 lesbian romances on my Kindle right now that somebody did.
Oh, okay.
And and Playing the Role of Herself was the first one I read. And I think, right? And then I think Above All Honor was the second book I read. And if it wasn't the second, it was definitely the third. Okay. And it just sucked me in. And even at that point, I'm trying to think how many years ago it was. Probably 8 years ago. There were a bunch of books out at that point. So I just read like all of them. So I'm going to read the blurb for the first one before I do anything else with this. So the blurb is, Above All Honor introduces single-minded Secret Service agent Cameron Roberts and the woman she is sworn to protect, Blair Powell, the daughter of the President of the United States. Cam's duty is her life and the only thing that keeps her from self-destructing under the unbearable weight of her own deep personal tragedy. However, she hadn't counted on the fact that her reluctant protectee will do anything in her power to escape the watchful eyes of her protectors, including seducing the agent in charge. Both women struggle with long-hidden secrets and dark passions as they are forced to confront their growing attraction amidst the escalating danger drawing ever closer to Blair. From the dark shadows of rough trade bars in Greenwich Village to the elite galleries of Soho, each must balance duty with desire and ultimately choose between love and honor. There are now 11 books in the series.
11?
It is a hefty series.
Can I just say, I've never read it. I feel like I can't even admit that in public. I'll have to turn in my Lesfic reading card or something because I never even read book 1. So
you just outed yourself. The thing that's funny about that one is I don't know that I've come across anyone who's lukewarm about it. They either love it or they hate it.
Oh, really?
And I mean, for me, obviously, I love it. And
yeah,
I wouldn't say that this is a pure romance series. It's more of a romantic suspense or intrigue. I'm not actually sure what's the difference between those two. But it's because there are just constant threats to Blair or her father's life because, you know, he's the president and she's his daughter. Yeah. And even throughout the series, it goes through like 9/11 happens. And then there are other like direct attempts to take one or both of them out. Okay. And, you know, it covers a lot of ground in terms of like the political landscape, but also just the character growth. Because, you know, Blair is sort of this wild child. She lost her mother when she was very young. She just wants to be able to paint, and she doesn't, you know, give a shit about the prestige of being the president's daughter. She just wants to be able to live her life, which is why, you know, she goes to those bars in Greenwich Village and, you know, is having anonymous sex and whatever. And then she doesn't want a detail. She doesn't want like a Secret Service detail watching over her. She just wants to be able to live her life. Yeah. Meanwhile, Cam, I can't remember what her trauma is. And anyway, for the 3 people, including you, who haven't read it, it's probably best.
Oi!
Not to spoil it. But, you know, Cam does have kind of a traumatic past, and she is really focused on her job, but she has this interesting thing going on where there's like a regular escort that she has kind of for that release from the everyday life. Uh-huh. And, you know, that stops when she falls in love, of course. And so we go from like those 2 places where they start to eventually, way later in the series, they get married. They're this very like settled but still passionate, like this really great couple. And what happens with the series is, I think it's the first few books, it's been a long time since I've read the first, I don't know, 8. But the first books really do focus just on them. And then you start having secondary romances with the people around them. And then by about the last handful of books, it's still them, but then we get equal weight of other couples getting together around them. Okay. So I think it's like the most lesbian orbit around a president that ever.
We can only dream. Yeah.
Could happen. That's right. So, and it also actually, the most recent book, which is great on audio. I haven't listened to all of them, but I think Abby Craden does a number of them. Cure of Grace does the latest one, Cost of Honor. And I know for some people it's hard to switch narrators, but I thought Cure of Grace did a fabulous job. And that one even has crossover characters from the Justice series. And so while I would say you could read the latest as a standalone if you wanted to. I think it's better if you read your way through. But even like if you haven't read the Justice series, it doesn't matter because I haven't, and I still kind of understood everyone's role in it. Yeah. It was interesting to see they had a really kind of prominent part to play in this book. So I don't even know if that's I don't know if that's a pure series and evolving.
It sounds like it starts off pure and then evolves. So yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
And at this point, I think my only complaint about the series is that I got really, really invested in one of the secondary couples, and it's Blair's best friend and the person that she ends up with. And I don't want to say more about that person's role because it just like, it blew my mind the first time I read it. And they just haven't been back in the last handful of books. And so, like, every book, I'm like, are Diane and Valerie coming back? Are they?
So Radcliffe, if you're listening,
I know. Like,
Tara has a request.
I have a request. Oh my god! Like, I would happily read a series of books just about those two characters. They are so good. And what was funny was that in prepping for this podcast, I went and I was looking at. I was trying to like refresh my memory about some of the side romances. And so I was looking at other people's Goodreads reviews because apparently I was useless on Goodreads and did not provide myself that information in my reviews. And this was back before I was doing professional reviewing. And it was so funny to see how many other people were like, but what about Diane and Valerie? They're my favorites. They're the reason I keep picking up these books. So yes, Radcliffe, if you're listening, it feels weird making this pitch, but please write more Diane and Valerie.
Does sound like I need to read at least the first 2 or 3 of this series and see how I feel. Because I know my girlfriend's read, I think she's read the first 7 or 8, and she said, you know, you really ought to read them. They are kind of like a rite of passage of, you know, lesfic. So, yeah, I really should.
Okay. Well, I mean, since you got me feeling like I should read about K.G. MacGregor, it's only fair.
Yeah, fair's fair. But yeah, just to pick up on a point that you said there, that's about falling in love with like secondary characters in books and then wanting them to have their own stories. That happens to me so many times, like especially in a series where that character is in the series all the way through, but they never really get their own story. Sometimes I get to the end of a series, I'm like, oh, but can you just now write a series about them because I really liked them and I want to know what happens to them. So yeah, I get that feeling.
I know. So I will sometimes post in my reviews if there's a character that really stands out for me and like, please write them a book. Please, dear author, I beg you. And occasionally it happens. And I feel like that's the best use of my reviewer privilege.
Well, I had a moment of that recently because I was already writing this book that features Carmen from Write Your Own Script. She's Tamsin's agent in Write Your Own Script. So Carmen's getting her own book. And it was so funny because a reviewer had just read Write Your Own Script, and they emailed me and said, is there any way you could write a book about Carmen? Because I really love that character and I really want to hear her story. And I was like, ta-da! Guess what I'm already doing? And they were so happy. I got like this gushing response going, oh my God, I can't wait.
I know. That's Jeannie Levick.
It's cool.
So Amy Herman Paul and I reviewed... No, wait. Did we review it together? We talked about Jeannie Levick's book, Embracing the Dawn, on this podcast probably a few years ago. And we both agreed that we loved the book, of course, to start. But we loved these two side characters. And we were like, what if they got together? Jeannie, please write their story. Please get these characters together. And she's doing it. And I think this book is coming out this year. So oh my God, I've just been dying for it for like more than 2 years now.
Readers for the win.
Right?
Yeah.
Thank you for being an awesome listener and supporting Tilt, the channel that brings you all the podcasts you want to hear. You're listening to Tilt. Find more podcasts on thelesbiantalkshow.com.
Okay. What is your other series that you want to talk about?
Okay, so my other one is a shared universe series, a closely shared one, according to my geeky system. Mm-hmm. And it's Melissa Brayden's Soho Loft series, which I think most of us will agree is just sublime.
Yes.
Never met anybody who didn't like it, so...
I wouldn't trust them if you did.
Exactly. The 4 women who run the Savvy advertising agency in New York have been friends since college. This is me doing a blurb. This is not the official blurb. This is my take on it. They're now in their late 20s and doing well for themselves. They're all single when we first meet them, all focusing on their careers and maybe having a little fun with someone now and then. Yeah. Mallory, Brooklyn, Samantha and Hunter all get their own romances over the 3 books of this series, and they all play significant roles in the lives of each other throughout the series. Book 1 is Brooklyn's story, book 2 is Samantha and Hunter, and the final book is Mallory's. I know, be still my beating heart. I loved this series, not just because of the romance, but mainly because I loved how Brayden made sure the friendships between the 4 women played just as an important role as the romances. Yeah.
She's so
It's
good,
one of the
Fraser.
things that I love to read. I love reading stuff where women are supporting each other. Yeah. Women aren't ditching each other as soon as they meet the love of their life and, disappear into a lesbian cave somewhere where they just, that's all I mean, I love the romances in these books. They're all gorgeous. I absolutely love them. I love how different they are. I love the variety that she brought into the romances and how they started, evolved, developed, whatever you want to call it. I love Just Three Words. That's my favorite one in the whole book, the whole series. But I just love that all through the book, those four women are just there for each other all the time. You've got your midnight chocolates. You've got everybody dropping everything as soon as one of them is having a crisis. I just think that's the kind of friendships that you want in your life. And I love that Melissa Brayden kind of recognises that and puts it into that series. Because the other one that kind of springs to mind is the Puppy Love series by Georgia Beers. That's one of my honourable mentions towards the end of this podcast. Similar thing. You've got the characters there, like it's almost like a family. Yeah, they've Jessica and Catherine support each other in that series. The way that Brooklyn's always there for Sammy, Sammy's there for Hunter, Mallory's there for everybody. I just love the interweaving of their friendship with the romances. It just gave it so much more depth than if it had just been 3 romance books. Do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. I think my problem with Puppy Love, and I think this every time I think about the series, is that at least the first book, maybe the first 2, they needed I needed another chapter or something. I needed a little more certainty that this couple was going to make it. And it was lucky for me that having further books showed me that they were still together. Yeah,
I see what you're saying. And if there weren't those books, you'd have been thinking, okay, I need an epilogue or something.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Whereas they were great otherwise. I very much enjoyed all 3 books. So this isn't like a knock on Georgia Beers. I just think occasionally her books do end like that, where it almost feels more like a happy for now. I'm not positive that it's a forever. Whereas, say at the end of Kiss the Girl, which is my favorite of the Soho Loft series and just one of my all-time favorite romances. Oh my god, Jessica Lennox is probably my all-time lesbian crush, and they have an amazing first kiss, and I just love that book. Anyway, but I got to the end of that book and there was no uncertainty for me about whether they were going to make it. They were definitely going to make it. So
that's interesting, because I never felt that about the ending of the Puppy Love ones. I had that same feeling. I know you're saying it was a happy for now, but I felt maybe it's because I'm an eternal optimist. I always am. But I got to the end of each book and was like, yep, they're settled. Done. Lovely. Next.
Amazing.
But yeah, I get what you're saying. I kind of get what you're saying, but isn't it funny how reading is so subjective? We can all read the same book and take so many different things away from it. But as I said at the beginning of this little spiel, nobody I've met didn't like the Soho Loft series. I mean, I think they're just never gonna age, those 3 books.
No. Okay, but what about her 7 short series? Have you read them?
I have, and they didn't grab me as much as Soho Loft. And I can't even tell you why. Can't tell you why.
I felt like the first book, it depended on the book for me in that series. I adored the first book, Eyes Like Those. Some of that was the chemistry. Some of it was just the fact that I love the idea of a showrunner and a writer on a TV show, getting that kind of background. Yeah. But also it was the seeing a character with anxiety and how it can fuck with your day to day. As someone who also has anxiety, that worked really well for me.
Yeah.
And I quite liked Elle and Gia's book, the surfing one.
Yeah. Now you're talking about them, I feel the same for you. I felt that book 1 was really good. Book 2 was good. I think the third one was the one that I don't know.
Oh, wait. Was that? No, so book 2 is Autumn's book. So that's the woman who, I think it's...
okay.
And that one I felt was okay, but I didn't really connect as much with Autumn and... Oh, God. Is it Kate? Is her partner?
Kate, I think. Firewoman.
Yeah. It was good, but I didn't connect as much with them. And then the last one, I don't know. It was interesting, the last two. I enjoyed them, but like Eyes Like Those for me was the one that just took it. Like
Yeah.
But again, it had the same really good friendship writing.
Yeah.
Which I appreciated. And I liked the Venice Beach setting. And then finally I got to actually go to Venice Beach early last year. So getting to think about like all of them hanging out there worked really well for me.
Yeah, I've actually been to Venice Beach myself a year before. So actually when I was reading it, I was like, oh yeah, I can picture where this is. This is kind of cool. Yeah. Because there's not that many places in America I've been. So, you know.
Mm-hmm. Very kind of them to set it in the one that to set it in the one you've been to.
Yeah, thanks for that, Melissa. Yeah.
Yeah, there is, I think too, like, especially if you've read Soho Loft, like, they're both excellent series, but like, I think Soho Loft was the first time seeing a series quite like that.
Yes, same for me. And I think that kind of sticks with you, doesn't it?
Yeah, like it feels like lightning in a bottle. And so Seven Shores is similar and still works beautifully, but there isn't that surprise of getting to experience something like that.
Yes. Maybe that's it. Maybe she spoiled us. Soho Loft spoiled us for anything else that she did in terms of a series.
Right? Thanks,
maybe.
Melissa. We're very happy to be spoiled like that.
Absolutely.
So that feels like a good segue, because speaking of things that surprised me, last year I listened to what is my last pick, and it is the Pinecone Romance series, which when I heard about it, I thought, oh, that's interesting. I didn't quite understand what they were doing, but it was really ambitious and I think pays off quite well. It follows three best friends, Clay, Trip, and Grace, as they all find love. It's all following the same timeline, and all three books are written by different authors.
This blows my mind.
Right?
Yeah.
So Missouri Vaughn wrote Take My Hand, D. Jackson Lee wrote Take a Chance, and V.K. Powell wrote Take Your Time. And I'm not going to actually share a blurb for any of these, because I'd have to share all three of them.
Yeah.
But the series basically works like each story is a standalone, but they also work together to create a single narrative really beautifully. So it's a small town romance that's set in Pinecone, Georgia, and the first book opens with River, who is Clay's love interest. She's an art dealer from New York City, and she's come to town because her aunt has passed away, and she has to deal with like her home and her stuff, and her aunt ran the local little art gallery there. But she ends up crashing her car into the local salon. And when I read that, I immediately pictured Truvy's shop from Steel Magnolias.
Yeah.
And then everything just unfolds from there. So Grace shows up on the scene because she's one of the local police officers. Trip shows up because not because she's a veterinarian, but she is a veterinarian, and she tries to play doctor with River because, you know, beautiful blonde.
Yep.
But Trip doesn't get the girl because it's actually Clay, who is the grumpy tow truck driver, who also happens to be an artist, and she's the one that gets the girl. And then in the next book, Trip's love interest is actually the new police officer in town working with Grace, and that's Jamie. Jamie was also Trip's best friend in college, and they had kind of each broken each other's heart through sort of a misunderstanding type situation. They haven't seen each other in like a decade. And then Grace falls in love with Danny, who's the new veterinarian in town working with Trip. So it's all very like, they're all up in each other's business.
Crossing over and okay.
And Danny is used to like working at zoos, and she doesn't really want to make ties in town because she doesn't plan on sticking around in Pinecone for a very long time. So it's quirky. And there's like silly things like there's this little police dog who has a bad gas situation. And they're like just as many nosy people as you would expect to find in a quirky small town romance.
Yeah.
But I found it really impressive that not only do they keep the timeline straight across all three books so that everything is unfolding in parallel, but the tone actually tracks across all three of the books too. Which again, like, how do you keep the tone on track?
Yeah.
With three different authors. And so, I listened to all of these, and the audiobooks were quite good. But the thing that I loved was that as I was listening to the second book, I got more perspective and depth on that first book and what was happening there. Because I got to see what was going on from Tripp's perspective and Jamie's perspective. And then the third book, the same thing happened, but all over again. And they don't all start at exactly the same point. Like, I think they stagger a little bit, or the endings go past a little bit. So we get to see Clay and River a little more established. We get to see Tripp and Jamie a little more established. But it just kind of blew me away. So that by the time I got to the end of the third book, I was so impressed at how it just works as an experience.
This just sounds so clever. I'm just sitting here in awe of 3 authors pooling their talents that way. And presumably a great editing team as well, because you'd need to keep everything on track with the editing team, with making sure that the timelines match, making sure that the secondary characters don't lose their voices from one to the book. I mean, that's the one thing I'm thinking of, is all those secondary characters. It's different, I'd imagine, if you're working on a collaboration and as an author you're said, your character is this, you write this character, and I'm going to write this character. I can get that. That totally works. But then you say, yes, but we're both writing this character, because this character that's clever. Really clever.
And then I have to imagine as they're writing to say, I want this character to do this at this point. Does that mess with your story? Yeah. I can't, like,
communication would be key.
Yeah, right? So,
I really want to read that. That sounds amazing.
And honestly, like, I got to the end of the first book and I was like, oh, that's pretty good. But it was the reading them in sequence. And that was when, like, my mind was blown. So definitely, if you're gonna read it, read all 3.
Yeah, sounds like it. Cool.
I know. So, are there any other honorable mentions that you want to give?
I've got a few more. So I've already talked about Georgia Beer's Puppy Love series. R.J. Nolan's LA Metro series. Again, shared universe. So they're all based around that hospital, but it's different characters in the 3 books. I loved the first one. I've read that I don't know how many times. But when she brought out Wounded Souls, was it 2 years ago now, I think, the third one? I just thought that was brilliant. Just, again, covering a subject that should be taboo and wasn't, you know, and it was handled so brilliantly. Clare Lydon, who's done 2 series now, because she's done the All I Want series, which is a pure series, because it's always about Tori and Holly all the way through. And the London series, which is like a shared universe, because there's different main characters in each book, but there's cameos from other characters from the other books in the series. I think she's just done the 6th one of that now, hasn't she? 6 or 7?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Jericho series by McMan.
Oh, man.
I know. See, I couldn't talk about that again, because I talked about that on another podcast with you, but I mean, that's a top pick for a series. And that's
I think that's
kind of an evolving one, isn't it? Because
it evolves genre. I mean, that's the thing that blows my mind with that series. I have never seen a series shift genre after the first book before, because it goes from, that first book is very much a romance. And the other 2 books are very much not romances, but you still get everything that's satisfying about Maddie and Sid is still there.
As the kind of core of it. And then everything else around it just develops and evolves and adds layers and layers and layers. I know. Yeah, I know. And I've already briefly mentioned Jay's Hollywood series, which I think starts with Departure from the Script, then goes to Damage Control, then Just Physical. I think that's the order, isn't it? And again, hats off to Jay for covering a serious subject in book 3 with Just Physical, talking about MS and Jules' life with MS and weaving that into a romance. I just thought that was brilliant. Damage Control is one of my all-time favourite lesfics.
Me too.
I love that book.
Oh, so, such a slow burn to it too.
Yeah, I know. And you don't mind. It's like there's, even the first time I read it, I was never at a point going, oh, will you just get together? Come on. It was just, I just enjoyed the journey, that slow journey so much, you know, of them finally getting to that point. And then when they did, it was like, oh, I'm so happy.
This conversation is making me want to go back and reread Damage Control and Kiss the Girl.
Jericho and
maybe even the first honor book.
Yeah.
I don't have time for this. Angela, where can people find you online if they want to connect with you?
I'm on Twitter and Facebook. On Twitter, I'm ALBrooksWriter1. On Facebook, I am ALBrooksWriter. I have a website, albrookswriter.com. And if you want something a little bit different, you can find me on Instagram as AngelaBrooks_15, where I don't really do much about my writing, but I do stuff about my new life in Germany, and how I'm settling into living into a new country and a new culture and just having some fun with that. So
thank you so much.
Thank
for
you.
Me.
This is I was so hoping you would be up for this idea, and yes, you were.
I'm Tara, and you've been listening to Les Do Books. You can email me at tara@thelesbianreview.com with your questions or comments. If you're an author who's interested in joining me on the show to talk about the lesfic you love or the trends that have you interested, please let me know. If you've enjoyed this episode, please check out the show notes where you'll find a Patreon link for Tilt, or visit patreon.com/thelesbiantalkshow. Our patrons get exclusive content like bonus podcasts that no one else gets access to. To find this and many other great shows, all you need to do is search for Tilt, spelled TLT, on iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, or Spotify. Okay. Whew. We're going to cut this little yawn out. The beauties of recording these things in advance.